Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a re-review for you of this little guy. This right here is the Spyderco Delica number 4. I'm re-reviewing this guy only because my first review was honestly terrible. I've grown a great deal as a reviewer, so I figured I'd do a better job of it this time. First off, let's do a little size comparison. First, we'll compare it against the Spyderco Delica. Then let's compare against the Ontario Rat number 2 and the Ontario Rat number 1. So you see it's in that nice intermediate size range there. Against some other Spydercos. Down here is the Dragonfly. Up here is the PM2. And, what the heck? Compare it against the Z Hunter, another stalwart of my reviewing table. I love getting to use the word stalwart. Moving on, this has a non-factory edge as well as a non-factory sanded clip. This came as a black clip. I fixed it. So there you go. And also, this is the full flat grind version rather than the saber grind or the serrated versions. So keep that in mind as you're watching the rest of the review. But there you go. Let's talk a little bit about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly for your Spyderco Delica. So on the good side, first off, the blade on this knife is great. The steel it's using is VG10, which although towards the lower end of the pack, is still good to go for everyday carry, absolutely. And you can get it in a higher end steel like ZDP 189, HAP 40, or, there are other sprints out there. But still, the steel is good to go, but the blade itself is great because it's relatively thin, and it's really ground to cut things, which is really nice. And the blade shape is good all around. You get some flat portion, a little bit of belly here. It's long enough for most tasks at 3 inches, but it's short enough to be legal in a lot of places, also 3 inches. So that's kind of a beautiful thing overall. The blade on this knife is great, and very, very seldom do I find myself needing more blade or different blade than the Delica would provide me. Next thing, I do love the spider hole. This is something I don't talk about most of my reviews because I assume a lot of knife guys know it, but this little hole as an opening mechanism is in a lot of ways way better than using a thumb stud like on the Rat 2, where you have to press your thumb against this. Not only does it give you a secure purchase, but more importantly, with a thumb stud, it can hang up on whatever you're cutting into, whereas the hole, whatever you're cutting, just kind of flows around the hole. It's just a beautiful thing, and, I have to sit back and remind myself every so often why it is that that's a great idea, and why I'm happy to see it here. So, there you go. Next thing, this guy does actually have full liners. If we take a look on the inside here, perhaps I need to shed a little light on the subject, you can see that inside the knife there are actually steel liners, which is a beautiful thing. It means that this has plenty of durability to it. It's not just a little piece of plastic, as the exterior look might suggest. And so it's a pretty durable knife. I've been using this, and I haven't, spared any knocks in my time with this knife, and it's still very happy. The clip on it is 4-position clips. You can have it configured for, let me shut this so I don't stab my table. Tip down, tip up carry on the right side, or tip down, or you can flip it over and do tip down or tip up on the left side. And that's nice because this knife is fully ambidextrous. The Spidey hole is just as accessible from either side. The back lock is not handed at all. So if you are a lefty, this knife is just as good for you as if you are a righty. That's kind of a nice thing because lefties often get screwed in the knife market. Next thing, the ergonomics on this knife are nice. They're not perfect, I'll admit that. Spyderco does make better ergonomic pieces. The PM2 comes to mind, the Mannix, those sorts of things. But you know what? They work just fine. It fits nicely in my hand. There's enough in the back here to give support. It locks in because it's got this FRN here. It stays in place very nicely. This is our fiberglass reinforced nylon here, this plasticky bit. And, it's nice in the hand. So, there you go. Next thing is the price on this guy is good. You're looking at $60 here. That's a lot of money for something that looks like it's mostly made of plastic. But the thing is, it's very well done. This is a knife that's been iterated on for a long time by Sal Glesser and Spyderco. And as a result, it's really masterfully done at this point. Yes, it's a little pricey at times, but what the amount of, frankly, refinement, the amount of care, and the amount of design that you're getting here, I think far outweighs that price and makes this a pretty good value at $60. This is a really stellar knife for everyday carry, and it was designed that way, and so for that price, I'm A-okay with it. You're not paying a huge price, and what you're getting out of it is pretty masterful. So I like the price very much, and I recommend it very strongly at the retail there. And then finally, on the good side, this is a functionally minded knife. And what I mean by that is that it's not meant to be jewelry. It's not meant to be high-speed, low-drag. It is a knife that's designed to be a great pocket knife. It cuts things. It stays in your hand. It's beefy enough to not be dangerous in any way. The backlock is super strong. But it's also not stupidly overbuilt in the way that a lot of modern folders are. And more than anything, it's just an incredible pocket tool. This is a pocket knife of the truest, it's of the truest nature, really. And so that functional mindedness really does bring me joy, especially when, and I'll freely admit to this, there are many knives that I carry and love that are more jewelry than anything else. So that's a beautiful thing here. So that's what's good. It's functionally minded. The price is, in my mind, very nice for what you're getting. The ergos are good. It's fully ambidextrous with a 4-position clip, full liners, good spider hole, nice blade. Just overall, it's a nice knife. Let's talk about what's great, though. For me, what's great about the Delica is that this is just exceptionally easy to carry. And I mean that in a couple of ways. The clip on it is kind of boring, but it's good. It's got enough spring to it. It's long enough relative to the knife. It's good to go in that way. It's also beautifully shaped for the pocket. If I have this in my right pocket or my left, you just reverse it. The kind of this hump here is going to be up against the back of my pocket and kind of disappear. And then the surface that my hand is rubbing against as I reach into my pocket is nicely contoured and relatively smooth. There's no flipper tab. There's nothing really grabbing at my pocket. This is just, it kind of disappears in the pocket. And particularly because it's relatively thin towards the top here, which means that the area where there's the most constriction, kind of the seam of your pocket as your hand goes in there, is where there's the least amount of knife. That's a nice little design constraint, at least when you do it at the tip up position. And then it's also pretty lightweight, I gotta say. For the amount of blade and steel liner you're getting here, 2.3 ounces is okay. So, I mean, overall, that's what's great, is that this is a pocket knife that, well, was really designed for the pocket, and it fits the bill beautifully. Carrying this knife is a pleasure in a way that carrying a lot of other knives is not. So that's what's great, is this is just exceptionally well made for the pocket. Let's move on to the bad. So on the bad side, first off, this is less a critique of the knife and more just a fact of mechanical life, but it does take a while for the action to break in here. If you pick one of these guys up at the store, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to open it and it's going to just be hellish. Like, oh my God, this is rough and terrible and awful. And don't let that put you off, because it will wear in. A little bit of lubrication along this little region up here, inside the, along the blade tang, is going to help it out, and frankly, just a lot of use. So it will get better over time. But nonetheless, it does take a little while to break in. Another thing is that the ergonomics are not perfect here. For instance, there are some hot spots on the inside of the FRN here. This little portion here, if you really bear down, you feel those kind of digging at your fingers a little bit. You could sand these out a little bit if you'd like, wearing some personal protection, because FRN isn't, a joke. But nonetheless, and it's also kind of begging for a finger choil. They've put that in a lot of other knives, but I feel like the Delica could use it as well. You can kind of put your finger up here as well, and it does okay for a little, but I'd kind of like to see that turned into a real finger choil like on the Dragonfly here. Moving along, next thing, this does not have a sharpening choil, which makes me a little bit sad. Spyderco seems a little resistant to sharpening choils. I don't quite get it, but it is what it is. Not the end of the world, though. It is a backlock knife, and backlocks are very nice. They've got a lot of robustness to them, but at the same time, they can be a little bit frustrating because they're not as straightforwardly one-hand closable as a liner lock knife. But the thing is, it still works. You just need a special technique. Opening the knife with one hand is straightforward. Just pop your thumb in there, but to close the knife, you kind of put your index finger in a position here where the knife is able to stop on your finger. Then, now that the blade is that the lock is disengaged, just choke up here and push it the rest of the way home. It's very easy, and after a while it becomes second nature to close this guy one-handed, although it's still probably a little more pleasant to close two-handed. But still, it's very possible, but it's a little bit different, and it takes a little bit of getting used to with a backlock. Next issue with it being a backlock is that this is not at all a flicky knife. I almost got it, I'll be damned. There you go. I was able to kind of flick it open there, and I used a little bit of wrist. And with a little bit of wrist, anything is possible. If you, if you pop this guy open and then push it the rest of the way with the wrist, you're going to be fine. But if you're looking for something that's a really fidgety, kind of back and forth, swingy action, this, the Delica is not that. This is not a free dropper in any sense. It's a backlock. So there you go. All of those things aren't terribly big critiques. A bigger critique is that this guy does come with a painted clip, like on this little guy, which is a Warncliffe Delica. And the painted clips, in my opinion, just not a great thing. Not only does it look a little out of place on anything but a black Delica, but it shows damage very well. This hasn't really been carried, see, but you get little scratches up on it. And honestly, I think it's just not the most attractive look for that. That's why I sanded mine off. In fact, if you look at the bottom of the clip, it's still black back there. But anyways, so there you go. And then finally, there is no deep carry clip option from the factory for this. You can buy them online and whatnot, but I would really like to see Spyderco actually step up and design a great deep carry clip for its knives and then just sell them to them. I think that would just be a beautiful thing. $5 a clip or whatever, they could make some money and everybody would be happy. But there you go. So that's the bad for me, is that there's no deep carry clip. The clip from the factory is painted, which is not great. It's not a very flicky knife. Using a backlock takes some adjustment if you're used to a liner lock or something else. It is kind of begging for a finger choil. There are some hot spots on the FRN, and it does take a little bit for the action to work in. Let's talk about what's ugly. The ugly about the Delica is that it is just terrible in terms of disassembly. And that's for two reasons. I mean, first off, the warranty is voided by disassembly from Spyderco. That's ugly on itself, but worse still, unfortunately, it's just not really well designed to be taken apart and put back together. You take out these screws, sure, but the problem becomes that at a certain point, there's a little spring that holds in the backlock, and that backlock spring is seated inside a chunk of plastic. And that plastic has another little plastic pin that needs to slot into the metal line. But you're going to get to a point where that little spring is pushing very hard against the backlock, which is pushing very hard against the bottom tongue of plastic, which is trying to deform as you seat the metal line. It's just hellish. You can do it, absolutely. And if you told me, Nick, you got to take this Delica apart and maintain it, I can do it. But I hate doing it. I really dislike taking this knife apart, and frankly, I just don't recommend that you do. The nice thing is that you can maintain this knife pretty well without taking it apart. You can get, 90, 95% of the performance just by blowing it out with canned air every so often. And if you need a deep clean, and going through and washing everything out, put it under a sink, put some soap into there, just wash it out pretty good. Then make sure you dry it out. Maybe blow a hair dryer through there. Make sure you get as much of the water as you can out of there. And then finally put a little bit of oil inside the pivot area. Something lightweight that'll penetrate. You can just use these little holes here to drop some of that in there, and it'll run beautifully. And then put a little oil on this back portion here, just to keep it running smoother. And so you can avoid the disassembly that way, but it still makes me a little bit sad that one of my favorite knives is one of my least favorite to take apart. But I just like disassembling knives. That's me. So that's the ugly. It's just no fun at all to disassemble. Let's talk about the final conclusions. Final conclusions, the Delica is one of the very best all-around pocket knife designs that I'm aware of, because it's beefy enough to get actual work done, which is beautiful, yet at the same time it's still made to cut things. I mean, the blade is ground in a way that you can really do serious cutting, even through thick or resistant materials. It's fine for food prep even, things like that. It's also inexpensive enough that it's not a constant source of worry. If you've got a $700 knife in your pocket, you're thinking about the fact that you've got a $700 knife in your pocket. $60, at least for most people, is a fair chunk of change, but it's not to that extent where it's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And the other thing is that it's not so inexpensive that it's not well built. You will never feel, at least in my experience, like I should have paid a little bit more and gotten a little bit more knife. It's great in that way. It's also small enough in the pocket that it's a pleasure to carry, but it's big enough in the hand that it feels great as you're using it, and you've got enough blade to use it for, most tasks. I'll definitely say that. I mean, there's really no reason why your Spyderco Delica couldn't be your only knife. The only real areas of weakness that it has is that the blade is relatively short, so you might consider having an Endura round, which is a much longer blade if you need that. Or it's also not a super hard-use, tanky sort of knife. But luckily, most people don't need that on a regular basis. No big deal there. This is also a knife that makes me realize that I am ridiculous and snobby when it comes to knives. I mean, I love myself some high-end knives. This is, the Grimsmo Rask, $700 pocket knife. But the thing is, paying hundreds of dollars more, definitely there is improvement in these two, but it's not that much of an improvement. I mean, in terms of an everyday carry pocket knife, The Delica is 95% of what I need here, and the rest is just a pure luxury. So I feel like a jackass for not carrying the Delica only. But, that's a matter of taste. Watch my 6 days of Delica video for a little bit more thinking about that. But nonetheless, this is still, in my opinion, the very best everyday carry knife. I mean, there are lots of good solutions, and there is not a very best for everybody. Maybe, probably not. And if there is, it's this one. But there are some knives that I personally like a little bit more, that bring me a little bit more joy. And if you want to go to a higher end price point, there are some pretty compelling options. But if you talk about a balance between price, between functionality, and between, all the other things, I feel like the Delica is the right answer a lot more often than it's not. And so, considering that I just said it is the very best everyday carry knife, it should come as no surprise that this is a shining freaking gem. The Delica is just great, and honestly, I recommend it to anybody who will listen. If somebody says, Nick, I need a knife, my first thought is Spyderco Delica, and then I adjust from there if they need something cheaper, if they need something weird. But this is really, really great. And so, I hope you buy a Delica. I hope you love the Delica. And I hope you remember that even though there's a little bit of craziness up in the channel and up in the knife world, really at the end of the day, this is pretty much covering the bases. Okay, there you go. I hope I didn't offend your Delica sensibilities and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.